The rubber soles of my sneakers squeaked against the freshly polished gymnasium floor as I made my way toward the locker room. Practice had ended 15 minutes ago, and most of the team had already showered and left, eager to start their weekend. I was running late, having spent extra time working on my three-point shot with Coach Martinez. The basketball season was reaching its critical point, and as the team's point guard, I needed to be at the top of my game. My name is Alex, and I've been playing basketball since I was 8 years old. Now, as a junior at Westlake High, basketball had become more than just a sport. It was my identity, my community, my safe space. Being gay in a small Midwestern town wasn't always easy, but on the court, I was just another player. My teammates respected my game, and that was all that mattered. As I pushed open the heavy metal door to the locker room, I expected to find it empty. Instead, I saw Jake sitting alone on the bench in front of his locker. Jake Thompson, our power forward, team captain, and the guy whose poster probably hung in half the girls' lockers in school. He was still in his practice shorts, his broad shoulders hunched forward as he focused intently on his shoelaces. His dark hair fell across his forehead, damp with sweat from the 2-hour practice we'd just endured. "Hey," I said, breaking the silence. Thought everyone was gone. Jake looked up, a half-smile forming on his face. "Just taking my time," he replied, his fingers moving deliberately over his laces. "No rush today." I nodded and moved toward my locker, trying not to stare. Jake had always been friendly to me, friendlier than most, actually. He'd been the first to high-five me after I came out to the team last year, the first to shut down any locker room talk that crossed the line. But lately, I'd noticed something different in the way he looked at me, in the way he lingered after our conversations. Practice had been particularly intense that day. Coach had us running full-court drills until our legs felt like lead, followed by shooting exercises and defensive formations. Jake and I had been paired together for most of it, our natural chemistry on the court making us an effective duo. There was a moment during a scrimmage when he'd caught my eye across the court, held my gaze for just a beat longer than necessary, and then perfectly executed the play we'd been practicing. It was like we could read each other's minds. The locker room was quiet except for the distant drip of a shower and the soft sound of Jake's breathing. I opened my locker and pulled out my towel, trying to act natural despite the strange tension in the air. Through the corner of my eye, I could see Jake was still working on his shoes, untying and readying the left one now with methodical precision. "Good practice today," I offered, filling the silence. "That pick and roll we ran in the third quarter is really coming together." Jake nodded, not looking up from his task. "Yeah, we're connecting well. You always know where I'm going to be." There was something in his voice, a softness, maybe, or an invitation, that made my heart rate quicken. I'd spent 2 years convincing myself that my attraction to Jake was one-sided, a classic case of falling for the straight team captain. But moments like this made me wonder if I'd been reading the situation all wrong. I sat down on the bench, leaving a respectful distance between us, and began unlacing my own shoes. The rhythmic motion gave me something to focus on besides Jake's proximity. I could smell his familiar scent, a mixture of sweat, deodorant, and that sandalwood cologne he always wore. It was distracting in the best possible way. "You know," Jake began, finally looking up from his shoes, "I've been thinking about college applications. Coach says I might have a shot at a scholarship." "You definitely do," I replied, genuinely excited for him. "You're the best player on the team, Jake. Any college would be lucky to have you." He shrugged, a gesture that somehow downplayed his talent while highlighting the movement of his shoulders. "I don't know about that. You're the one with the basketball IQ. I just jump high and run fast." I laughed. "There's a bit more to it than that." Jake smiled, and for a moment, we just looked at each other. I felt a familiar flutter in my stomach, the one I'd been trying to ignore since freshman year. Jake had been my first real crush, the person who made me finally understand and accept my sexuality. Not that he knew that, of course. Some secrets were better kept hidden, especially when they involved straight teammates who were just being friendly. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said suddenly, breaking eye contact to focus on his shoes again. He was now untying his right lace for what seemed like the third time. "Sure," I replied, trying to sound casual despite the sudden dryness in my mouth. "Do you ever feel like—" He paused, searching for words. "Like people see only one version of you? Like they've decided who you are, and no matter what you do or say, that's all they'll ever see?" The question caught me off guard. It wasn't what I was expecting, but it resonated deeply. As the only openly gay athlete at our school, I knew exactly what he meant. All the time, I admitted. People hear I'm gay and suddenly that's my whole identity. They forget I'm also a point guard, a straight-A student, a terrible singer, and an expert at making microwave nachos. Jake laughed, the sound echoing in the empty locker room. Your nachos are legendary, I'll give you that. But yeah, I continued, feeling a sudden openness between us. It's like they put you in a box and then get confused when you don't fit neatly inside it. Jake nodded slowly, his fingers still working on his laces. Exactly. Everyone thinks they know who I am. Jake Thompson, basketball star, future business major, dates cheerleaders, will probably marry his high school sweetheart and move back to coach at Westlake after college. There was a bitterness in his voice I'd never heard before, a frustration that seemed to run deeper than typical teenage angst. I stayed quiet, sensing he had more to say. But what if that's not me? He continued, his voice lower now. What if there's more to me than what everyone sees? What if I'm still figuring it out? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. The implications of what Jake was saying, or what I thought he was saying, were too significant to misinterpret. I needed to be careful, to give him space to express himself without my assumptions coloring the conversation. I think that's normal, I said gently. We're 17. We're supposed to be figuring things out. Jake looked up at me then, his blue eyes intense and searching. Have you always known? About yourself, I mean. The question hung in the air between us. It wasn't the first time someone had asked me this, but it felt different coming from Jake. More important somehow. Not always, I answered honestly. I think I always felt different, but I didn't have the words for it until middle school. And even then, I tried to ignore it for a while. Thought maybe if I just focused on basketball enough, it would go away. Jake's expression softened. Did it work? I smiled. What do you think? He laughed again, but it was quieter this time, more reflective. Yeah, I guess some things don't just go away no matter how many three-pointers you sink. The implication of his words made my breath catch. Was Jake trying to tell me something? Or was I projecting, reading too much into a normal conversation between friends? Can I tell you something? Jake asked, finally abandoning the pretense of adjusting his shoes. He turned to face me fully, one leg on either side of the bench. Something I've never told anyone? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I've been having these thoughts, he began, his voice barely above a whisper despite us being alone. Feelings, I guess. For a while now. And I don't know what to do with them. My heart was racing now, but I forced myself to remain calm. What kind of feelings? Jake ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen countless times before games. Feelings about who I'm attracted to, who I want to be with. And it's not who everyone expects. The locker room suddenly felt too small, too intimate. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting shadows across Jake's face as he looked at me with a vulnerability I'd never seen before. Jake, I said carefully, whatever you're feeling, it's okay. You don't have to fit into anyone's expectations but your own. He nodded, but his eyes were downcast again. Easy to say, harder to live. You know how this town is. How my dad is. I didn't know. Jake's father was a former Westlake basketball star himself, now the owner of the largest car dealership in town. He was at every game, loudly coaching from the sidelines, even when Coach Martinez asked him to tone it down. His expectations for Jake were clear and unwavering. Excellence on the court, a business degree, and eventually, taking over the family business. I do know, I acknowledged. But I also know that living inauthentically is its own kind of pain. Trust me on that. Jake looked up, meeting my eyes again. How did you do it? How did you find the courage to come out? I considered the question, thinking back to the terrifying days leading up to my decision to tell the team. I got to a point where the fear of staying hidden was greater than the fear of being known. And I was lucky. I had supportive parents, a few close friends who already knew. But mostly, I just couldn't keep pretending anymore. It was exhausting. I'm exhausted too, Jake admitted, his voice cracking slightly. I'm tired of pretending to be interested in girls when I go to parties. I'm tired of nodding along when the guys talk about which cheerleaders they want to hook up with. I'm tired of lying to everyone, including myself. The confession hung in the air between us, monumental and fragile. I resisted the urge to reach for him, to offer physical comfort. This moment wasn't about my feelings for Jake. It was about his journey, his truth. You don't have to figure everything out right now, I said gently. And you don't have to tell anyone until you're ready. Or ever, if that's what you choose. But know that whatever you're feeling, it's valid. And you're not alone. Jake's eyes met mine, and there was something new in them. Relief, perhaps, or gratitude. Thanks, Alex. I've wanted to talk to you about this for so long, but I never knew how to start the conversation. Is that why you've been staying late after practice? I asked, a small smile playing at my lips. Tying your shoes very, very slowly? Jake laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to release some of the tension from his shoulders. Was it that obvious? Let's just say your shoelace technique could use some work if stealth is the goal. We both laughed then, the sound filling the empty locker room and easing the intensity of the moment. When our laughter subsided, a comfortable silence fell between us. It felt like something had shifted, like we'd crossed a threshold into new territory. So, Jake said finally, what happens now? It was a loaded question, one with many possible interpretations. I chose the most supportive one. Now, you take things at your own pace. You keep exploring who you are and what you want. And you remember that you have at least one person in your corner, no matter what. Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful. And what about us? This thing between us. My heart skipped a beat. So there was a thing between us. It wasn't just in my imagination. What do you want there to be? I asked, careful not to assume or pressure. Jake's gaze was steady now, more confident than he'd been throughout our conversation. I don't know exactly, but I know that when I'm with you, on or off the court, everything makes more sense. I feel more like myself. The admission was both thrilling and terrifying. I'd spent so long convincing myself that Jake was unattainable, that my feelings were one-sided, that hearing him express something similar was almost disorienting. I feel that too, I admitted. I have for a while. A small smile played at the corner of Jake's mouth. I know. I've seen the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. That obvious, huh? Only to me, Jake assured me. I notice everything about you, Alex. That's part of what scared me so much. How much I notice, how much I care. The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep within me. This wasn't just attraction or curiosity. There was genuine emotion behind his words. We don't have to label anything, I said. We can just see where things go. Take it slow. Jake nodded, relief evident in his expression. Slow sounds good. I'm still figuring a lot of things out. Me too, I assured him. Despite what it might look like, coming out doesn't mean you suddenly have all the answers. I'm still learning every day. Jake finally finished tying his shoes, properly this time, and stood up from the bench. I followed suit, suddenly aware of how close we were standing, of the height difference between us, of the way his presence seemed to fill the space around me. Thank you, Jake said softly, for listening, for understanding, for being patient. Always, I replied, meaning it completely. For a moment, we just stood there, looking at each other in the fluorescent light of the empty locker room. Then, slowly, deliberately, Jake reached out and took my hand in his. It was a simple gesture, but in that context, two basketball players in a high school locker room in our conservative town, it felt revolutionary. His hand was warm and slightly calloused from years of handling basketballs. Our fingers interlaced naturally, as if they'd been designed to fit together. We didn't speak, we didn't need to. The physical connection said everything our words couldn't yet articulate. After what could have been seconds or minutes, Jake gently released my hand. I should go? My dad's waiting in the parking lot. I nodded, understanding the reality that existed outside the sanctuary of this moment. See you tomorrow? At the game? Jake smiled, and it reached his eyes in a way that made my heart flutter. Definitely. Look for me on the court. I'll be the one passing you the ball. And I'll be the one making sure you look good, I replied, falling back into our familiar basketball banter. Jake grabbed his gym bag from his locker and slung it over his shoulder. As he walked toward the door, he paused and looked back at me. This changes things, doesn't it? I considered the question, all its implications and possibilities. It changes things, I agreed, but maybe in the best possible way. Jake nodded, a mixture of apprehension and excitement on his face. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex. See you tomorrow, Jake. And then he was gone, the heavy door swinging shut behind him. I stood alone in the locker room, the events of the last half hour replaying in my mind. Jake Thompson, team captain, star player, the boy I'd convinced myself was unattainable, had just come out to me, had just held my hand, had just acknowledged that there was something between us worth exploring. I sat back down on the bench, overwhelmed by the significance of what had just happened. It wasn't just about the potential of a relationship, though that thought sent a thrill through me. It was about witnessing someone take their first steps toward authenticity, toward self-acceptance. It was about being trusted with something so precious and personal. As I finally changed out of my practice clothes and prepared to head home, I couldn't help but smile at the memory of Jake meticulously tying and readying his shoelaces, buying time, gathering courage. Sometimes the biggest moments in our lives arrive disguised as ordinary ones: a quiet locker room, an empty bench, a pair of shoelaces that needed just a little more attention than usual. Tomorrow, we would step back onto the court as teammates, but with a new understanding between us. Tomorrow, we would begin the delicate dance of figuring out what we could be to each other, both in public and in private. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and discoveries. But for now, in this moment, I allowed myself to feel the pure, uncomplicated joy of connection, of being seen and understood, of finding unexpected courage in an unexpected place. And as I finally left the locker room, turning off the lights behind me, I couldn't help but think that sometimes the most important plays happen after the final whistle. Sometimes the real game begins when everyone else has already gone home. The gymnasium was dark as I walked through it, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. Outside, the sky was turning the deep blue of early evening, stars just beginning to appear. I thought about Jake driving home with his father, carrying this new truth inside him like a basketball cradled in protective hands. I thought about how brave he had been, how vulnerable. And I thought about tomorrow, about stolen glances across the court, about the brush of hands during drills, about the countless small ways we might begin to explore this fragile, beautiful thing growing between us. One step at a time, one shoelace at a time. After all, some things are worth taking slowly. Total _char_count, 18,760.